Hello once more and welcome to lecture 8 of the Adventist Pioneers, and we are still continuing with James White. In this video we want to understand how he understood the Millennium. Also we understand that he got this from Millerism, and James White is a person of interest because a lot of what Seventh-day Adventists believe is based on his authority or his theological authority over this movement and understanding. In the previous video, we dealt with the Trinity. Now we're going to talk about the Millennium, the so-called Jubilee. So, Jubilee in the translation, of course, not in the original version of the Bible. So, for this one, we're going to need Genesis chapter 1 because everything that happens in the Bible is built on Genesis chapter 1. And unfortunately, for you Christians, there's no New Testament in Genesis chapter 1. Yet, the whole universe, the whole earth, the whole world, the whole future of human or mankind is written in Genesis 1 verse 1, but there's no Jesus there. There's no New Testament. But with respect, I will teach you the right thing in the course of showing you what the pioneers believed. So, before I can show you the Bible, I want to go into the mind of James White. So let me share my PDF again. Alrighty then, and here's a PDF and a series of lectures given by James White in the 1800s. Here we see the 1870s, so this is probably before, not probably, it is definitely before the fiasco of the General Conference of 1888, where they fought over the separation of the divinity of Christ, as they say, from the Trinity, or the need not to separate, and others separated from it, and it became a fiasco. It tore the Adventist movement into sects and corners, which is very normal for humans not to agree on anything. It's rare to find human beings that agree on absolutely everything. But anyways, so in our timeline, we're around 1878. Let me just look. Is there anything interesting here? 1874, Bates dies. 1872, Bates dies. 1874, the fundamental principles of 1872 are published again by James White in the first issue of Signs of the Times of June 1874. So let's look at James White. This is 1878. Interesting. So, but it's more or less the same time, I guess. And by Uriah Smith in the Review and Herald of November 1874. In this introductory remarks to the in his introductory remarks to the fundamental principles in the Signs of the Times, James White states, "In presenting to the public this synopsis of our faith, we wish to have it distinctly understood that we have no articles of faith, creed, or discipline aside from the Bible." This is very interesting because they think, or they thought, that their beliefs were biblical. Some were, some were not. We do not put forth this as having authority with our people, nor is it designed to secure uniformity among them as a system of faith, but is a brief statement of what is and has been with great unanimity held by them. So what we understand here concerning this this date is that the pioneers did not wish to be like the rest of the Christian world. They didn't want to feed their fellow Adventists in this movement creeds and doctrines and things from the Catholic Church and the rest of the Christian world. They hoped to break free from this world, this Christian world, and this Western way of thinking to go back to the biblical world. In 1877, the Biblical Institute, where Uriah Smith and James White outlined the principal doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventists. Now we understand that the principal beliefs of the Seventh-day Adventists were formulated largely by James White, but also in conjunction with Uriah Smith, who obviously takes on the prophetic side of things. So this was done or held in Oakland, California, covering everything from the sanctuary to prophecy, the nature of sin to the nature of Christ. This institute confirmed and strengthened the teachings of Adventism as outlined in the fundamental beliefs of 1872. I respect the Adventist pioneers, and I always will, not because they were correct, but because they were trying to go back to the Hebrew Bible. They were trying to go back to the Hebrew and the Jewish way of belief, but they didn't know how to, because they were stuck in a Christian world and in Christian spirituality, but they were trying their best. All right. We are going to go to questions on doctrine first. Questions on Doctrine, published in 1957 as a way of teaching Adventist theologians the beliefs of the Adventist Church. It is done in a Q&A kind of way so that the Adventists may be able to defend their faith. So this gives us a little bit of scope into the Adventist Theological Seminary, that their focus on theology is not really to get at the husk of the matter or the original meaning of the scriptures. In today's world, they are concerned with the defense of what's called the Adventist position. So the Adventist position is just a theological position. It means that in this religiously political environment, or this politically religious environment, or this political environment around religion, which is what theology is, they have their own stance. A theological position is not something that is factual and based on the Bible. It is a preference. You prefer to stand like this because when you read the Bible, you understood that. It is not factual, it is a position. So we go to the lecture, Adventist Understanding of the Millennium, from Questions on Doctrine, published in 1957. It says, what do Adventists understand to be the chronological timing of the millennium in relation to the end of the age, the nature of its two resurrections and sequence of its major events, and the outcome of and sequel of the millennial period? Please outline your view. All right, so that was a question. The Adventists respond and say, the word millennium has come to give a specialized meaning in the minds of most Christians. A 1,000-year period when Christ, they say, will reign on earth and his saints amid plenty, peace, and progressively increasing righteousness. This is actually very hopeful, actually. It's wrong, but it's very innocent and cute. The word does not occur in the Bible. It is derived from a Latin word mille, which means annum, which means mille annum, which means 1,000 years. A 1,000-year reign of the saints with Christ is foretold in Revelation 20, verses 2 to 7. But there's no statement in the chapter that the saints will reign with Christ on earth during this period. The vision that delineates the 1,000 years is one of a series that must be considered as a chronological sequence if we are to succeed in placing the millennium in its proper relation to other eschatological events. So in all of my lectures so far, I've been making a noise talking about William Miller and eschatology. The Adventist movement is built on eschatology. It is not necessarily built on biblical truth. It's built on eschatology, a hope of a good ending. That's why the Adventists have a hope channel. They don't believe in teaching the absolute Bible truth, because why? We have Christ, we have hope, and that's where they basically fool themselves. Revelation 19 depicts the second and advent of our Lord. Chapter 20 speaks of the binding of Satan, or Satan. In Hebrew, we call him a Satan. Two resurrections, 1,000 years apart. So they talk about two resurrections. The Bible talks about one resurrection. And actually, the resurrection is part tradition in its own original Jewish setting. For example, the Jewish priests, or the Israelite priests, the Levites in the temple, they never believed in the resurrection. And not believing in the resurrection does not disqualify them from going to the world to come. It does not qualify them from being God's children. It does not disqualify them from going to the world to come, because it's just a personalized belief or a tradition. But if the priests were denying something that was explicitly written in the Bible, then that would be problematic. So if somebody, in other words, the Bible doesn't care about what you believe. The Bible cares about what it is telling you about you yourself, the environment you live in, time, and the future, and about God. So the Bible doesn't really care about your personalized beliefs. So the idea of two resurrections already is falsehood. It's not true. And it's not the fault of the Adventists. It's because of what they've inherited as Christian doctrine. And it's here 1,000 years apart, the general judgment of evildoers and their destruction in the lake of fire. That's also very interesting. A lake of fire. Is it figurative or is it literal? Interesting, but we'll deal with that when I teach you the New Testament in the future. Revelation 21 pictures the descent of the holy city, the New Jerusalem. And chapter 22 continues the description of the city and the joys of the redeemed in the eternal state. Now it's talking about Revelation 21. If you recall, in my previous lectures, I showed you Christian history as written by Marcion. Marcion, the first author of the New Testament. And Marcion basically hated the God of Israel and hated the Jews, yet he wrote the New Testament, and others also added and contributed, and he also added and contributed to a New Testament written by others in the whole community of the Church Fathers, which is basically pure apostasy from the Jewish Bible, from the Jewish world. And how can I call the New Testament the Bible if it's written by someone who hated God and hated Israel? It's not for me. It's not for my spirituality. It's not for you. If you're an African, this is not for you, because your spirituality is Hebraic. It's not. It's Jewish. It's not Christian. But anyways, I'm not here to choose for you what you should believe. So let's look at this in Revelation chapter 21, as cited here in Questions on Doctrine. It says Revelation 21 pictures the descent of the holy city, the New Jerusalem. And chapter 22 continues the description of the city, its joys of the redeemed, and the eternal state. Now, you're going to see in the New Testament, you are going to see that I will say some things might be true or are true, and some things are not true. And the reason why I will say this is because you must remember the church fathers were the disciples. They are Gentile disciples of real Jews. So they learned Judaism, but they didn't want to practice Judaism. They didn't want to become Jewish. They wanted to create their own version of Judaism, and that brought them to apostasy, idolatry, which we know today is Christianity. And I'm sorry if you are offended. It's a historical fact. So let's go read Revelation 21 and see what it says. I'm going to be reading from Bible Gateway, which is probably the most readable Christian Bible online. Let me just go there and go to Gateway. I'm going to be reading from the ESV, the English Standard Version, because in my opinion, now that I can read Hebrew, in my opinion, the English Standard Version is the best translation of the Bible into the English language, even though it is not perfect. It is far from perfect, but it is more palatable than the King James Version, which is an utter violation of the Hebraic Bible. So if we go to Revelation 21, it says the following. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth have passed away, and the sea was no more." Now, I want you to understand one thing immediately. I'm not doing an exegesis of Revelation, but it says, supposedly, this guy named John, or if he was Jewish, his name would have been Yochanan, he saw physically the new earth and the new heaven. This is not possible. You cannot see it physically. It's not possible. Because in Hebrew, the world we live in today is called Olam Hazeh, which means this world. And the world to come is called Olam Haba. This Olam Haba is the one that has been misinterpreted by the founders of Christianity to mean heaven or paraiso, paradise. That when at the end of time, we will leave this earth and go to paraiso. And this is not true. Because at the end of time, Paraiso, or the Garden of Eden, will come to us. God will descend from his throne and move his government to the earth. The Garden of Eden will come here. The New Jerusalem will come here, or will become part of this place. So when he says, I physically saw the new earth, I say that it's not possible, because when we transition from this world to the next world, the transition is not done physically, it is in our consciousness. We will become conscious in the level of God's spirituality. And so everything will be made new. Yes, God will physically renovate the earth, but he will not create a new earth. He will not create a new heaven. Because in Genesis, it says Bereshit. It starts with the letter Bet, which means God wanted to make this world his home. So God cannot destroy this earth. He can only renovate it. That's why I say that in our consciousness is the transition from this world to the next world. So whoever wrote the book of Revelation, starting with Marcion, who is the author of the New Testament, the first known author of the New Testament, we must understand that he took Jewish ideas and interpreted them in a way that he wanted to interpret them. So we don't really know if there was a John. We don't even know where the book of Revelation comes from. But Christian history tells us that the author of the New Testament that is known to us is Marcion, a church father. Verse 2 says, "And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." It says, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. This is already very, very wrong, because in Judaism, or in the Bible, in the original Bible, and the prophets, especially what they said, the bride is Israel. The bride is Israel, Judah and Israel, adorned for her husband, which is God. Here, Marcion says the new Jerusalem is the bride. So that's wrong. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be as their God." So I want to ask myself a question. If the authors of the New Testament hated God and the New Jerusalem, if they hated God and the Jewish people, which God are they talking about in the New Testament? Which God are they talking about in Revelation? It's a question I have. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall not be more. Or rather shall be no more, neither there shall be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I'm making things new." But also, he said, "Write down these words are trustworthy and true." And he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." Some people teach in Christianity that the Alpha and Omega is Jesus. Some say it's God. I say Alpha and Omega can never be God, because Alpha and Omega is created. Alpha and Omega are the letters in Hebrew, Aleph Tav. That's the Hebrew alphabet. In the book of Genesis, it says, Bereshit bara Adonai et. This et is Aleph Tav, and that is Alpha Omega in Greek. So the Torah and the words of the Torah are created by God. They don't create God. So God can never say, I'm the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. That means then your God is not God, he's a creature. And it would mean that the spirit of the book of Revelation is actually Jesus and not God. And that's a whole other spirituality that is not associated with God, but associated with Egypt. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of water, it says, a life without payment. Huh. The one who conquers will have a heritage, and I will be his God, and he'll be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, and for the murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, liars, blah, 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 which is the second death. So they are destined for the second death. Let me go. I should be here. No. I should be here. Good. So, so then the New Jerusalem, it says, then came one of the seven angels who had seven bowls of the seven plagues, last plagues, and spoke, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. This is a recreation of the Bible. The Bible understands the wife to be the people of Israel, and God is their husband. In the book of Revelation, we are reading that the bride is supposedly the saved people or the Christians, and the lamb is their husband. This is very, very unbiblical. But also, what is unbiblical are the seven angels. It's very interesting because these church fathers learned Judaism from kosher Jewish rabbis who were hoping that these Greeks and Romans would convert to Judaism and be holy, but they did not. So the seven angels, it's a play upon the seven kings and the seven vials and the seven bowls that the seven kings broke before there was ever a creation. So this is a perversion of Kabbalah. Kabbalah means a reception or receiving of divine metaphysical truths. Kabbalah has led us to understand the Bible because it comes from God. But now these guys learned the Kabbalah, but they are perverting the Kabbalah in the book of Revelation. This is what we understand just by reading a few verses. And he carried away me in spirit in the great height of the mountains and showed me the holy city. Actually, I don't want to read this whole thing anymore. It's just disturbing to me. But I want to get to the millennium. So in the millennium, they understand that there'll be a new Jerusalem, and then they assign cubits and sizes. They're copying the book of Leviticus by assigning sizes, and also using the stones of the Cohen, of the priest that he wore on the breastplate to describe this city. Anyways, I'm not going to read this whole thing anymore because I say it's very disturbing to my soul. But the reason why I'm showing you this book of Revelation is because of what it says in the Adventist theological treatise, which is called Questions on Doctrine, which is used to train pastors, was used in the past. They tell me it has been reintroduced in some universities. So here it is. The understanding of the doctrine of the millennium is based on this chapter of Revelation 21, which pictures the descent of the holy city, blah, blah, blah. There seems to be nothing in these chapters to indicate that this is not a chronological sequence of events. With the aid of a parallel of Bible passages that describe the second coming of Christ, the resurrection, and the final punishment of the wicked, it is possible to outline the events of the millennium from the beginning to the end with an assurance of accuracy. I beg to differ. It can never be accurate unless you understand Genesis chapter 1 as it is written in Hebrew and as it is interpreted in the Hebraic world. I don't want to say in Judaism, because now you start thinking, Judaism is a religion. They prefer to do things their way. We prefer to do things our way. No, Judaism is not a religion. It is a kingdom whose king is God, not Christ. God is the kingdom. And the kingdom that will come is of King David. So there's no Christ, because Jesus was not from the house of David. He was from the house of Joseph. That's why his legal name was Yeshua ben Yosef ben Abraham. And then, of course, here they continue with the thought of the second coming, second advent of Christ. In Revelation 19, Christ is pictured at his second coming as a mighty warrior leading the armies of heaven to battle against the hosts of evil. This emphasizes the effect of his coming upon the unsaved. In Revelation 14, Christ is pictured as coming on a cloud, crowned as King of Kings. This is replacement theology, because the King of Kings is God, not Christ. So if Christ is pictured in Revelation 14 as the crowned King of Kings, he is replacing God. And this is correct in the minds of Marcion, because Marcion wanted to replace our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, with a human God, because these were Greco-Romans, they were idolaters. And so he wants a human to represent God and to replace God. That will never happen. In that chapter, the gathering of the righteous and the wicked is depicted under the figure of a harvest. In verses 15 and 16, the righteous are gathered as the harvest of the earth. This is the rapture. So the Adventists never believed in the rapture. But when you are reading now from the book, Questions on Doctrine, when they see it as a harvest, it means they are looking through the lens of Christianity, specifically American Christianity, American spirituality. So this is basically the rapture, and the rapture is not biblical. There's no harvesting that's going to happen. The wicked are also reaped as, oh my goodness, the wicked are also reaped the clusters of the vine earth, fully ripe grapes, and cast into the great wine presses of the wrath of God. And this wine press is mentioned again in chapter 19, where it is said of Christ that he treadeth the wine press, etc. The wine press comes from Jeremiah, and basically not only Jeremiah, but I think other prophets as well. It depicts God's anger, but at the same time, it depicts the experience of the Jewish people, that the Jews are crushed to produce the best of Jewishness, which means under persecution by non-Jews, the Jews refine their faith. But now it's twisted in the book of Revelation, and it emphasizes on God's wrath, as it were. And then, of course, in this millennium, there's a death of sinners, there's judgment to the rebellious sinners of the earth. Christ comes as judge, as avenger, in overpowering glory with a fire sword of the battle against the whole. So this is a very physical book. Revelation elsewhere not a physical book, a physical understanding. Revelation elsewhere pictures the same class of people cowering before the face of the Lamb. There's no lamb in the Bible. And the upheavals of nature accompanying the second advent, the heavens departing as a scroll, every mountain and island is shaken. Again, there's more physicality. In both chapter 19 and 14, the effect of Christ coming on the world is described under the figure of treading the winepress, with the blood pouring out of the winepress, one 1.6 furlongs, etc. So the wrath of God, or the Lamb, actually they don't say God, the wrath of the Lamb, in the Adventist understanding, according to their book, is that the wicked people will be crushed like grapes and there'll be blood everywhere. In the Bible, originally, the crushing of grapes has got nothing to do with non-Jews. It's only the Jews that are crushed in order to become refined, to bring out the best, to bring out wine, to be the best Jewish version or the best Israelite version of themselves. Overwhelming destruction could hardly be more graphically described. Not only does nature cooperate with that evil, blah, 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 blah. And then there's the beast, of course, the beast and the false prophet, symbols of organized apostasy in early visions of Revelation. All right, so we understand that now this Adventist eschatology, even by 1957, is firmly established on Christian symbolism. The Apostle Paul, looking with prophetic eye down the stream time, described the mystery of iniquity with a personalized name, that wicked, etc., etc. The problem with Paul is that he doesn't appear anywhere in Jewish history. And yet, they say that he studied under Gamliel, who is the grandson of the great Hillel, but Paul does not appear anywhere in Jewish history. And then, of course, in this millennium, there's the binding of the Satan. In Adventism, they teach that for 1,000 years, Satan will be bound on this earth. He'll be walking around for 1,000 years with no one to tempt or kill or do whatever, because all the saints will be up in heaven and there'll be no one on earth. This is conjecture. It's not biblical, and I'll show you now. And the Adventists are not the creators of this conjecture. They didn't create this. They inherited it from Christianity. The resurrection of the righteous, and it says the scene changes. John sees the throne of judgment, which sits the blessed Holy One, ones who have part in the resurrection. They came to life again and reigned with this guy, Christ, for 1,000 years, etc., etc. So the resurrection of the dead is a Jewish tradition. As you can see, the Christians continued it and wrote it into their Bible, which is Matthew to Revelation. And then they continue with this idea of two resurrections, Revelation 20. Between the two resurrections, they that are Christ are raised at his coming. The dead in Christ shall rise when the Lord descends in heaven, which is the voice of the archangel with the trump of God. This is elsewhere referred to as the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible. This is a Jewish tradition which says, at the coming of Mashiach, the Tekiah Gadolah, which is the long the long uninterrupted sound of the ram's horn, is the one that will sound, and the dead shall be raised, which is true. This is elsewhere, it's true, and it appears in the New Testament because the writers of the New Testament were once disciples of kosher Jews. This is elsewhere referred to as the last trumpet, blah, blah, I already read that one. And Jesus described his coming, in his coming of heaven, seen by all and mourned by the tribes of earth who are not ready for him, as the time when at the sound of the trumpet, his elect are gathered from the earth. This is the book of Matthew. So the elect is taken from Jewish chashkafa. It's taken from Jewish worldview. The elect are the people of Israel because God chose the people of Israel to give them the Torah for them to be the light of God in the world. So if you want to be part of the elect, you convert to Judaism. But you don't have to be part of the elect to be able to make it to the world to come. Listen to me very carefully. You do not have to convert to Judaism to go to the world to come. You only have to keep the 7 laws of Noah, or you need to become a sojourner among the Jewish people. That's the only way that you will be saved and redeemed at the end of time. But we'll get into that in future studies when we look at the New Testament head on. So the Adventists are continuing Christian beliefs. Are these accounts, or rather, all these accounts are a glorious, visible, audible coming and sounding of the trumpet, are concerned with the gathering of Christ's elect. You must remember that this is an oxymoron. Christ's elect is an oxymoron because the elect is a Jewish concept. Christ does not exist in the Jewish or the biblical concept or worldview. In the biblical tradition, there's no Christos. This is a Greek invention. So they talk about the first resurrection. In the Bible, there's only one resurrection. There's no 2 resurrections. All right, so the book continues about the translation, which means being changed. The righteous are taken to heaven, etc., etc. So these are the Adventists in the Millennium. So I'm not going to go through all of it. This is what the Adventists believe, and we understand that it's based on James White's teachings. If you want to read the rest, of this, you're welcome to. Just go and download from Google. Go download Questions on Doctrine, Seventh-day Adventist theology book. You can get it for free on the internet. And then there's Judgment and 1,000 Years. You can go read all of this for yourself. The reason why I don't want to read all of it is because I want to go to the Bible quickly after talking about James White and show you the real thing. So, Biblical Institute, a synopsis of a lecture on the principal doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventists, Oakland, California, through the Steam Press of the Pacific STA Publishing House. The year is 1878. So they took some highlights from the lectures and teachings of Elder James White and Uriah Smith between the years, between 1 to the 17th of April in 1887. So let's go to some highlights. Lesson 1, the Millennium. Smith, but it's not Smith this time, this is White. He says, the word millennium signifies 1,000 years. Okay, so we go back to Questions on Doctrine. And the reason why I'm going back to Questions on Doctrine for this one is because it's actually 481, is it? The reason why I'm going back to Questions on Doctrine is I want to see that the millennium, let me just go see the page again. I want you to see that the beliefs that we see in this book, Question on Doctrine, come straight from James White. Where's the millennium again? It was page 480 something. 489. So I should be somewhere here. That's 460. That's 496 is already too far down the road. All right. So I want you to see what it says here. It says the word millennium has come to have a specialized meaning in the minds of Christians. And what does it say? The word millennium signifies 1,000 years. The popular view of what is called the temporal millennium is that the gospel of Jesus Christ will yet so far control the minds and hearts of men that the whole world will be converted and become holy by its influence, and that is and that this happy state will continue 1,000 years, and that during this time Christ will reign with his people spiritually and close, and that the close of the millennium, at the close of the millennium, he will come the second time when the judgment will take place. So what James White said is what we read in close this one, is what we read in is what we read in Questions on Doctrine. It's a continuation of James White. The only difference is now the theologians in the Adventist Church have had time to make the necessary references, which are the chapters of the Christian Bible that one can consult. And then it continues to say, but a careful examination is sufficient to fully convince the intelligent student that the sacred scriptures do not teach that at any period of time all men will be converted to God. So when he says sacred scriptures, at James White, I wonder if he's talking about the Old Testament or if he's talking about the New Testament. But in Christianity, when they talk about sacred scriptures, even in the theological world at university, we understand sacred scriptures to be the Hebrew scriptures, the original Bible. There were but few righteous men from Adam to Moses, he says, and the numbers of the just in the Jewish age compared with the multitudes of the unbelieving were very small. So when they talk about the Jewish age, they're talking about two things. They're talking about the age after Abraham made a covenant with God. That's the Jewish age. That's where it begins. And then they believe that the Jewish age ended when Jesus was born or something like that. The reason why Westerners always talk about an age is because Westerners come from a worldview that says you must always create something new. And when something new comes, whatever existed is now old. You must move away from the old and move towards the new. And they are so mistaken when they look at the Bible and try to make the Bible something new. The New Testament is exactly that. It doesn't come from the Bible. It is Westerners trying to rewrite God's Bible because they believe in their minds that the Jewish age is over because Rome and Greece had conquered Judea. So the Jews in their minds must move away from Yah or Yahweh and move towards Christ. They are sorely mistaken. They are so mistaken that they've closed themselves from the possibility of even going to the world to come. But you, who's listening to me, you have an advantage because I'm showing you what is correct and what is not correct. God will not shut you out of the kingdom if you hear the truth and you act on it. But if you want to choose to live in ignorance, there's nothing I can do for you. Neither does God's plan, White continues to say, neither does God's plan in the Christian age embrace the conversion of all men. So they see themselves, Westerners see themselves as people living in a Western age, a Christian age, where Judaism is irrelevant and it is meaningless. This is blasphemy because God never changes. Moses said we should never add to the words of the Bible or take away from them. He was talking about the Torah, specifically the first 5 books of the Bible. And moving away into a Christian age, into Marcion's world and the church fathers, it means we must move away from the Torah and from the God of the Torah. So now Christians in their minds have moved away, and that's why they have a new God, which is Christ. Neither does God's plan in the Christian age embrace the conversion of all men. The gospel is preached to all nations. The gospel basically is an announcement that there's a new God in town. There's a new God in town. The God of the Jews is no longer God. This is blasphemy, and it's an atrocious attack on God. And thus God visits the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. This is Acts. So Acts, to take a people out for his name, Acts is this verse reaffirms replacement theology, because the Adventists see themselves as a remnant of Christianity. So Christianity saw itself as a remnant. Now the Adventists see themselves as the remnant. And the remnant is neither, because when the original Bible talks about the remnant, especially the prophets, they're talking about the remnant of Israel, those who are still faithful to the Torah, even after apostasy. Among the finally saved, am I still on? Let me see if my video still works. Yeah, I'm still on. That's good. Where am I? Okay. So among the finally saved will not be found all of any of the generation or any of the nations, but some out of every generation, every tongue will join the song of the Lamb. The problem is that there's no song of the Lamb, there's the song of Moses. When the Christian Bible talks about the song of Moses and the Lamb, it is equating the Christ to God. The people in the Bible, Miriam and Moses and all the Israelites, they rejoiced after God took them across Yam Suf, the Red Sea, and they sang a song to God, not a song to the Lamb. The Lamb, or Christ, is a creation, it's a construct of the apostasy. But the Adventists are not the authors of this thinking. The Adventists inherited it from Christianity. Thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue, blah, 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 blah. God cannot die. Okay? God cannot be slain. God cannot die. From the very nature of the case of the conversation, or rather conversion of the world. So they keep talking about the conversion of the world, because this gospel about a Christ who replaces God, and they say he is God to fool people, he then evangelizes the whole world so that the whole world accepts the gospel and becomes Christian and therefore becomes saved. This is a false Christian doctrine. The Adventists are not guilty of believing it or promoting it. They inherit it from Christianity. Basically, if you remember in the Bible, Jacob had two children, Isaac and Isaac Isaac had two children, Esau and Jacob. So Esau is Christianity. Jacob is Judaism. That's the symbolism. This is, I think, it's in Genesis 21, Parshat Toldot, but we'll get to that some other day. And Jacob and Esau, Christianity and Judaism. Esau, through Christianity and Rome, want to take over the world, because it says in the Bible, Esau was a hunter. He was a mighty man and a hunter. It doesn't mean that he was hungry, that he hunted. It means that he conquered nations and peoples to force his way of life upon the nations. Whereas Jacob, it says, he was in the tents of who? Of Melchizedek, studying the Torah. That's why the Jews are called the people of the book, because the Bible belongs to the people of Israel. The interpretation of the Bible belongs to the people of Israel. The nations must learn about God and the meaning of the Bible from the people of Israel, from Jacob, not from Esau, because Esau does not care for his birthright. He sold it to Jacob. All Esau wants is land, money, and to control people. So when these Greco-Romans refused to become Jewish, but took the Jewish knowledge they had to create a new religion, they were doing the work of Esav. So this whole fascination of preaching the gospel to the rest of the world, it is converting all of humanity to the gospel of Esau, which says God is irrelevant, the Jews are irrelevant, there's a new God in town, there's a new way of being saved. You must just believe in Jesus and you will be saved. And salvation, the Bible tells us that salvation only comes from God. Salvation doesn't come from God's representative, a vicar or a priest or even Jesus. God is the only one who is able to save. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you in baby terms, in very simple terms. I just want to share my Word document again. Where is the Word document? There it is. It's very, very simple. Oopsie daisy. Let me just undo this. Actually, it should be an aleph, not an ayin. All right, so what's going on in the word Yeshua? There are Messianic Jews that talk about Yeshua. I used to follow that movement as well. Grammatically, a is a possessive pronoun in English. It means he's. It's a possessive pronoun. Yeah, the first part is God. It's Yud Hey. This is God. Yeah, Shua. This shu means an act. It's a verb. It means an act. So it means God, Yah, enacts salvation. Or, if we read it backwards, salvation, or rather his is the salvation. Salvation is his. Who's his? God. Because we have the Yud, which is Yud Hey. That's God's name. It's the name that Rastafarians say Yah. In Africa, we also say Yah, because we have an Israelite heritage. So, Yeshua does not equal Jesus. Jesus is a spirit from Egypt. And that spirit from Egypt is used as a mask for a guy, for the Jewish guy who was called Yeshu, who did not create Christianity. So when you read the New Testament about a Jewish rabbi named Yeshu or Jesus who was nailed on the cross, it's historically accurate, but it is not Jesus. Jesus is an entity from Egypt, a face that masks, that uses the life of Yeshu to make itself a God, a new God of a New Testament. This Yeshu was not a God. It was a Jewish rabbi, a controversial Jewish rabbi, I might add. but he never, created Christianity. And that was not his idea to create Christianity. Christianity is created by the Greeks and the Romans. So here we have it. This one is an Egyptian god. This one is the real Jewish persona, but he was not God. His life was hijacked. His story was hijacked and rewritten as you see it in the Gospels. So the Bible, everywhere in the prophets, it talks about Yeshua. And this Yeshua is not Jesus. It just means God's salvation. And when does Yeshua come? Yeshua comes at the end of time. So when somebody says, I'm saved, it's not true. It's a lie. A person that leaves their sins and finds God, that person has done repentance. They should say, I have repented, not I am saved. I have repented of my sins, because God asks for repentance. Salvation only comes in the end of time. So let's go to the Bible to understand this millennium. The Bible in Hebrew says, Beer-Sheva. Actually, I've got it all wrong here. The Bible says Beer-Sheva bara Elohim Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. That's what the Bible says. You can carelessly translate it to, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that's what the Bible says. But the Christians do not have its interpretation. The interpretation of the Bible has always been with the rabbis, the Jews, and that's whom God gave it to, the Jews. The Jews, originally the Torah was taught by the priests, but once the priests were corrupted by the Greeks, they couldn't teach a pure Torah. So the rabbis and the lawyers, which are called scribes, took on that responsibility. So how many words does the Bible start with? Bereshit is 1, bara is 2, Elohim is 3, et is 4, Hashemayim is 5, ve'et is 6, and then I'm going to use a different color for the 7th word, which is haaretz. No, I think orange is too close to red to stand out. So let me use blue. What does this mean? Here we see that God was in the beginning. God was in the creation. This is the letter Aleph. The letter Aleph has a numerical value of 1 because Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 tells us that God is 1, not 3, 1. If I write out this word to get its gematria or numerical value, it will be Aleph, like this, which is Aleph, Lamed, and what is this? Hey. Okay, so the numerical value of these is 111, which is 1111. It's not an addition. It keeps telling us that God is 1. But also Aleph it can be written as Aleph. This one we can put an R sound, but this one we put an A sound. So this would be an A sound. This would be an E sound. So Aleph means 1000. King David says, 1,000 years are like a day to God. So King David says 1,000 years are equal to one day. So we understand that King David was talking about Genesis 1 verse 1 because Bereshit is equal to 1,000. Bara is 1,000. 1,000. Elohim is 1,000. Et is 1,000. Shashamayim is 1,000. Ve'et or We'et is 1,000. And Haaretz is 1,000. So what does this tell us biblically speaking? Biblically speaking, this tells us that it is true. The earth was created in 6 days. The earth was created in 6 days. But on the 7th day, God rested and called it a Shabbat or a Sabbath. And also God made it holy. So the Bible begins with 7 words because God would take 7 days to create. And when God creates in these 6 days, the 7th day is special because it becomes the Millennium. So the earth has 6,000 years to play out its history. These 6,000 years are the 6 days. So if you were to ask me, where are we today in Earth's history? Today in Earth's history, we are here at the end of this letter Tav. Biblically speaking, we are in the year 5,700. No, we're in we're in the year 5,786. God gave us 6,000 years. So if you are counting the years using the method of the Bible, you start from the highest number, 6,000. So what does this tell us? Very, very simply, let's do some mathematics here and say 6,000 minus 5,786. This gives us 214 years. That's very interesting. Let's change colors. Let's go to black. So what does this 214 years mean? It means that there's 214 years before history is concluded, before this world is concluded, and we make a transition to the world to come. So we are in Olam Hazeh. Olam Hazeh in Hebrew, in English it means this world. So this world is 6,000 years. Olam Haba is the world to come. This is what Christianity falsely interprets as heaven, world to come. I'm sorry, I don't mince my words because the Bible is sacred to me and the Bible must always speak what it needs to speak without people violating it or trying to gag it. So this Olam Haba begins at the end of the 214 years. Then humanity will transition to the next world. And this is where salvation happens at the end of this 215 years, 14 years. This is where God gives reward to sinners. This is where God saves people who are not Jews and brings them into the kingdoms. This is where God redeems the Jews at the end of time. The Messiah must come. Let's put Messiah here. The Messiah must come during these 240 years. Why must the Messiah come during these 214 years? It's because 214 years, you must remember that we said 1,000 years is a day. So God gave us 6 days as Earth's history, which means 6,000 years. But also God took 6 days to create the world, and the 7th day was a Sabbath. So the seventh millennium is also a Sabbath. It's the great Shabbat. Shabbat Shabbaton, the Sabbath of Sabbaths, which is represented by Yom Kippur in the Hebrew scriptures. Shabbat Shabbaton. So, where are we? Why must the Messiah come before the end of the 6,000 years and not in the beginning of the 6,000 years? Is because it's prohibited to travel on the Sabbath. So these 214 years are equal to a prophetic 2 hours. These 2 hours is when the shofar or the trumpet in Jerusalem and in the land of Israel is blown every week before the Sabbath to say to the people, tools down, stop all the work, and anticipate the coming of the Sabbath. And so between now and the end of these 214 years, humanity must prepare itself for the coming of the Messiah, but most importantly, the second coming of God. Second coming of God. What do you mean, the second coming of God? It means that God left the Herodian temple, not the the Herodian temple, which Cyrus started to build. So Cyrus built the second temple, but it wasn't finished. It would be finished. It was finished by the first Herodian dynasty. But God left that temple because of a sin called sinat chinam, which is baseless hatred between the Jewish people. So the Shekhinah couldn't stay with the Jews that left. So the second coming of God is imperative. God must return to his temple in Jerusalem, which will be built by the Messiah and the Jewish people. So that means the Shekhinah, which is the female aspect of God, and God himself, which is Ein Sof. God is Ein Sof, he without beginning and end. The meaning of Ein Sof, he will be joined together with his wife, the Shekhinah, and they will be one, according to the prophet Ezekiel, in Jerusalem, in the new temple built by the Messiah and the Jewish people. So the gospel goes around telling people that you are saved. You are not saved yet, but if you do repentance, you come to know God and you prepare yourself for the salvation at the end of time. The Jews were saved in Egypt. The nations are not yet saved. They'll be saved at the end of time. At the end of time, the Jews will not be saved, but they'll be redeemed, which means they'll be removed from Olam Haba to Olam Hazeh, together with Gentiles that decided to unite themselves with the Jewish people, that decided to become sojourners with the Jewish people, that decided to know God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and let go of their idolatry, and especially the idolatry of the gospel and other faiths that are not aligned to God. So, in other words, Judaism is the future of the world because the Messiah is a son of David. Yeah, here's how this Messiah is a son of David. I'll explain. So, in Beer-Sheva, in the first 1,000 years, Adam lived 930 years. I need a different color here. So Adam lived from the beginning of the 1,000 years to being 930 years old. So Adam lived towards the end of the first letter Tav that appears in the Bible. The Messiah will come at the last letter of the Tav that we see in Genesis, which is the last letter of of Earth's history. So King what's his name? Adam lived 930 years. Adam donated 70 years to King David. King David was born in the beginning of the 4th millennium. Here's King David. He lived 70 years and died. Adam lived 930 and gave 70 years to David. How do we come to this conclusion? Again, you must know the Hebrew language. So here's the name of Adam written in Hebrew. This is Adam. This is King David. David's name is written like this in Hebrew. And then we are waiting for the coming of the Messiah, and the Messiah is written like this. Mem Shin Chet. So let's use a different color for the sake of illustration again. Adam is called the first Adam. The Messiah is known as the second Adam. So we know that the Messiah unites both King David and Adam, but how does he do it? Like this. In Hebrew, we read from right to left. So we read Adam, David, Mashiach, or David, Mashiach. But we are reading in this direction. Now, if we read downwards, if we read in this direction, we also get Adam again. Aleph, Dalet, Mem. Aleph, Dalet, Mem. This Mem looks different from the other one because it's Mem Sofit. So you have to know Hebrew grammar to see the difference. This is just basic Mem. So we read Adam to the left, and we read Adam downwards. So we understand that the link between Adam and the Messiah is King David. And we also understand that the Messiah will come from the house of King David because David links the first Adam and links him to the second Adam that will come. So the Messiah will come from the house of David, and the Messiah will be fully human. The Messiah will not be half God and half man. He will not be born of any virgin. He will be born of two Jewish parents, and the Spirit of God will be upon him to lead the Jewish people. So all of these things that we are learning or that we see in the book Questions on Doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventists and their citing of the book of Revelation, the Adventists are not the ones at fault. The Adventist pioneers are not at fault. They inherited idolatry from Christianity, and they were trying their human best, their theological best, to get out of idolatry and stand out in Christianity as a biblical people. But alas, they did not have the Hebrew scriptures. Therefore, they could not get out of the maze of idolatry. So this whole idea of converting people and sinners to Christianity, to the gospel, is the building of the world of Esau, which is the Roman world. The gospel is a Roman treatise. Christianity is a Roman institution, religious institution. And the governments of the world that we see today, they belong to the church. They belong to Rome. So Esau has built his own world, challenging God, building his own world on top of God's world. But we saw this in the history book of Christianity because Marcion challenged God by saying his word is old, and he came up with the New Testament. Marcion didn't only hate God, but he hated the children of God, God's only son, which is Israel. God doesn't have a physical son because he cannot have children, but he adopted the people of Israel as his would-be son. So if we must talk about the Son of God, it's not Jesus. The Son of God is Israel. Anyways, it's been a long lecture. I'm going to stop here. Basically, what you can take away from this is that we can see that for real, James White is the chief architect of Seventh-day Adventist doctrines, and he works hand in hand with Uriah Smith. I would give anything to be able to go back in time and sit with the Adventist pioneers and share all this biblical corrections with them. I don't say this in a condescending way. I don't say this because I think I am better than them. No, I can see Westerners that are trying to reach God, but they were limited by the idolatrous world that they lived in. You as an African, you as a Jew in Christianity and Adventism, you as an Israelite in Adventism and in Christianity, you have no place there. Your place is among the people of Israel, sharing in the Torah of Moses. I hope this lecture helped a little bit. In the next lecture, we're going to look at the next theological propositions based on the lectures of James White. I'll see you in the next lecture. Goodbye.